I don't know why the worst things always seem to happen on buses. Maybe it's because you're trapped between strangers and a locked door. Maybe it's because the night moves faster when you're watching it through a scratched window. Either way, these are 4 true stories I've been sent. Each one about an ordinary bus ride that turned into something you don't forget. Story 1. The Last Passenger. I used to take the last bus home from my evening shift at a small grocery store. It was a city route, not too long, but it felt endless at night. The bus always came at 11:40 p.m., and there were usually only 2 or 3 people, then just me until the end of the line. The driver was an older man named Gus. He wore thick glasses and a faded baseball cap. He'd nod at me when I got on, and I'd nod back. It was a routine that felt safe. One cold Tuesday, I was the only passenger from the moment I boarded. I sat in the middle like I always did, across from the rear exit. The lights inside the bus hummed, and the heater made a low rattling noise like loose coins. The windows fogged over, and I could see my own faint shape staring back at me. We crossed a long bridge that cut over the river. You can see a slice of the city on one side and a line of trees on the other. Right in the middle of that bridge, the bus made a soft chime. The door chime sound it makes when someone presses the stop button. I looked up. No one had come aboard. No one was walking down the aisle. I glanced at Gus in the mirror. He gave me a small shrug like he'd heard it too. "Faulty button," he called back. "Happens sometimes." We kept going. The bus chime rang again, softer this time, like it came from the back corner. I checked every row. Empty. The heater rattled again. The smell of old rain soaked into the seats. I tried to shake it off. Gus pulled into the next stop and opened the doors anyway, just in case. Cold air rushed in and lifted the tiny hairs on my arms. Nobody got on. The doors sighed shut. The chime rang a third time, quick and urgent. Ding, ding. It came from the very back. I stood up. I don't know why. I guess I was trying to prove to myself there was nothing there. I walked down the aisle, my shoes sticking a little with each step. The back seat was wet. Not like spilled water, but like someone had sat there in a soaked coat and left a dark, perfect shape. The smell changed too, like river water and dirty metal. I looked up at the camera dome near the ceiling. The little red LED flickered. Gus must have seen me turn because he called again. "You all right back there?" "Yeah," I lied. "Seat's wet." That's all. We kept rolling. There's a section of that route where the bus passes a small park and a dead-end road. That night as we went by, I heard another sound. 3 slow knocks from the back door. Not the button this time. Knuckles on metal. Knock, knock, knock. Gus tapped the brakes. The bus jerked. The wet seat was empty. The knocks came again, louder. The bus door is locked tight when you're moving. Everyone knows that. But the light above the door flashed green like someone had pushed the release from outside. Gus pulled over and opened the back door a few inches. "You kids think this is funny?" he shouted into the night. No answer. Just the hiss of air brakes and the wind off the river. The road was empty. I could see the park bench and the old chain-link fence. No one was there. He shut the door. We drove on. Neither of us spoke. A few stops later, Gus parked at the end of the line where I usually got off. The lot was lit by a single buzzing lamp. I stood up to leave, but Gus held up a hand. "Wait a second," he said. He leaned over and tapped the screen connected to the camera system. He ran back the last few minutes, and we watched the bus from 4 angles in grainy black and white. The empty middle rows, the foggy windows, the back seat, and then, as the bus crossed the bridge, the back seat darkened like something sat down. No person, no shape, just the seat compressing and the water spreading. When the knocks came, the camera over the rear door shook, like someone was trying to push it from the outside. But there was still no one there. I didn't sleep that night. A week later, I asked Gus if he'd ever seen anything like that before. He stared through the windshield for a long time and said, "There was a girl, years back, jumped off that bridge during a storm. Folks said she used to ride this route, always sat in the back." He swallowed and rubbed his hands together. "I used to think the chime was just a glitch." He said it without looking at me, like he was talking to the road. I changed buses after that. I started getting rides from friends, or I walked. But sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear I hear that soft chime behind me, like someone asking to get off. Twist ending. A month later, I found a damp bus ticket tucked under my apartment door. Same route, stamped with the exact time my bus crossed the bridge that night. Story 2. Announcements. I worked as a night cleaner at a community college outside of town. After my shift, I'd catch the 12:05 a.m. bus that stopped right by the parking lot. It was usually late and usually empty. The bus had a female voice for its automatic announcements, the kind that says, "Next stop," and then the street name. I used to find that voice comforting. It felt like a metronome in the quiet. One Friday, I got on and tapped my card. The driver had headphones in and didn't look up. I picked a seat near the front. As the doors closed, the announcement chimed. "Next stop, Henderson Avenue." Except, the voice sounded wrong. Slower, breathier, like someone was holding the mic too close to their mouth. I didn't think much of it at first. We pulled away from the curb. Streetlights streaked by. The bus was so empty that I could hear the rubber of the wipers squeak across the glass. Then the announcement spoke again, but it didn't say the next stop. "Sit down," it said. I stared at the speaker like it had spoken directly to me. The driver didn't react. He was still staring dead ahead, head bobbing a little to whatever he was listening to. The chime sounded again. "Don't talk," the voice said. I felt the weirdest pulse of embarrassment, like I'd been scolded by a teacher. I looked around to see if anyone else had heard it. There was a man in a hoodie a few rows back, leaning against the window, face hidden. He didn't move. The driver kept going. The bus rolled through a set of lights. Outside, I saw the Henderson Avenue stop flash by. We didn't slow down. The voice crackled overhead. "Don't get off," it whispered. "Hey," I said to the driver, standing halfway. "I think your system is—" The bus jerked hard. The brakes squealed and I stumbled into the rail. The driver pulled one earbud out. "You good?" "The speaker," I said. It said, "The chime cut me off." "Sit down," it hissed. The driver frowned up at the speaker, then at me. He didn't say anything more. He just put the earbud back in and kept driving. We passed my usual stop, then another. The voice said the same three things in the same slow, wrong way, in a different order each time. "Sit down, don't talk, don't get off." It felt like rules. It felt like warnings. At the third missed stop, I pulled the cord out of habit. The bus chimed. The voice announced a stop name I didn't recognize. It wasn't on our route. Something like Blackwater Road. I glanced out the window. All I could see were dark trees and the edge of a narrow road that didn't look like it could fit a bus. We were nowhere near that. The man in the hoodie lifted his head and scratched his cheek with the back of his hand. His nails were dirty. When he turned, I saw there was nothing inside the hood but darkness. Not a face in shadow, just empty black space, like the hood was a tunnel. I sat down fast. The voice purred out of the speaker again, pleased. "Good." The driver took a sharp turn I'd never felt before. The bus leaned and groaned. Outside, the streetlights were gone. We were moving through a strip of land with dead grass and low broken fences. I saw a sign go by, white paint, hand-lettered, Blessing Way. I had never heard of it. There was no stop for it on the map at the shelter. The announcement chimed twice. "We are not on schedule," it breathed. I could hear the sound of someone's mouth close to the mic, like a wet click of tongue and teeth. I stood again and moved to the driver. "Please," I said. "I need to get off. Right here, anywhere." He didn't look at me. His hands were locked on the wheel. His left earbud dangled on his shoulder now. His skin looked gray under the dash lights. The voice chimed and said, "Don't get off." I reached for the red emergency handle by the door. The speaker let out a long, low tone that felt like it shook the seat frames. "Don't get off," it repeated. The hoodie man slid sideways, like he had melted into the aisle, and stopped 3 rows behind me. I still couldn't see a face, just that empty space where a head should be. I yanked the handle. The door bucked open against the wind and slammed shut hard enough to rattle my teeth. The driver finally spoke, voice shaking. "I can't stop it," he said. I tried at Henderson. We were on a road I didn't recognize at all, with fields on both sides and no houses. The bus slowed anyway. The voice said, "Next stop," and then whispered my name. Not my last name, my first name, the one I never told the driver, the one I never put on my transit card. The bus pulled to the side of the road. The doors opened with a tired sigh. Cold air came in and smelled like old leaves and something sweet, like spoiled fruit. No street sign, no shelter, just a narrow dirt path leading into a field. "Don't get off," the voice said again, so soft it sounded like a breath against my ear. The hoodie man was one row behind me now. I could see into the hood. Black space, no bottom. I stepped to the door anyway and looked out. The field seemed to pulse, like the grass was breathing. I turned to the driver. "Please," I said, "take me back." He didn't answer. His eyes were wet and bright, like he was trying not to blink. The bus didn't move. The speaker clicked once, twice. I didn't get off. I stepped back and the doors closed like the bus had been waiting for my answer. We turned around without the driver touching the wheel. I watched his hands. He kept them flat, palms open, like he was afraid to grab anything. The bus drove us back into the city, past Henderson, past the college. The announcement went silent. The hoodie man was gone when I looked again. No sound, no footsteps. Just one dark stain on the seat where he had been. I got off 6 stops later and walked home fast. When I passed the route map at my usual shelter, I looked for Blessing Way or Blackwater Road. Not there. None of the names we'd heard were there. Twist ending. The next week, the female announcement voice on my faithful route sounded normal again. Bright. Harmless. It said, "Next stop, Henderson Avenue," and I tried to laugh at myself. Then it misfired for 1 second and whispered my name under the regular words. So soft I almost missed it. I don't take that bus anymore. Story 3. Window seat. I was 18 when this happened. I'd just started visiting my girlfriend who lived 2 towns over. The bus between our towns ran late into the night, so I'd catch the 10:30 p.m. back home. My parents thought buses were safer than driving. They were wrong. It was winter. The kind of winter where the cold makes a sound. Tiny pops in the air. The crack of ice under your feet. I sat by the window because I liked to watch the dark fields roll by between neighborhoods. Sometimes deer would lift their heads out of the brush as we went past and stare, their eyes catching the yellow light from the bus like coins. That night, the bus was packed at first, and then emptied fast. A group of kids got off near the mall. A couple left at the library. A woman with a folded stroller got off by the church. After that, it was just me, the driver, and a tall man in a long coat who sat 2 rows behind me. He had a newspaper folded in half and never turned a page. I put my forehead against the cold glass and made fog circles with my breath. The bus slowed for a long stoplight out by the edge of town, where the road turns into a highway. There's a walkway there that goes under the bridge. As we pulled up, I saw someone standing on the walkway, half hidden by the pillar, just a shape at first. Then the shape turned, and I realized it was a child. She had no coat, just a thin red dress and pale bare legs. Her hair was soaked and hung in strings around her face. She lifted one hand and put her palm on the glass of the shelter. It left a wet print. I stood up before I realized I was standing. "Driver," I said, "there's a kid out there." He leaned forward to look. We were still 20 yards away. The bus crept up, engine growling low. The tall man with the newspaper didn't move. The child didn't either. She just watched us come with that wet hair stuck to her cheeks. The light turned green. The driver flipped on the hazards and pulled up to the stop. The doors opened. Cold air wrapped around my legs like water. I stepped down 1 step and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl turned her head. Her eyes were wide like she'd been crying for hours. She didn't answer. She pressed her hand to the shelter glass again. There were already several prints there, small and smeared, like she'd been doing it over and over. I took another step down. The driver said, "Hold up, I'll call someone." He pulled the radio off its clip. The tall man finally stood, folding his newspaper into a tight rectangle like he was saving it. He moved down the aisle without looking at me and stopped at the back door. He looked out at the girl the way you look at a painting you're not sure you like. "Don't go out," he said, not to me or the driver, but to the bus itself. His voice was flat. "Close the doors." The radio crackled uselessly in the driver's hand. He tapped it and got nothing but static. "Great," he muttered. He looked at me and then at the girl. "Kid, where's your mom?" The girl finally moved away from the glass. She took one step left. I noticed then that her feet were clean. Completely clean. The concrete was wet from melted snow and dirty with salt, but her feet left no prints. She lifted her hand and rubbed at her eyes with the heel of her palm, a small, tired motion. I could hear her nails scratch her skin. Then she looked at me and smiled in a way that made my throat lock. It wasn't happy. It was like she had learned what a smile was by watching someone else and was trying to copy it. I took the last step down to the sidewalk. The cold hit my lungs like ground glass. The girl took another step back, toward the shadow of the bridge. Her wet hair stuck to her neck. I felt this deep pull in my chest, like a string tied from me to her getting tugged. "Wait," the tall man said behind me. I ignored him. I put out my hand. "It's okay. You can come on the bus." She tilted her head, and her smile changed, just a little. She reached out like she was going to take my hand. Then she looked past me, over my shoulder, into the bus. The tall man met her eyes. He slowly shook his head. I watched the smile fall off her face like someone had wiped it away. She turned and ran into the dark space under the bridge so fast it didn't look real. I didn't follow. The tall man grabbed my coat sleeve and pulled me back inside. The doors closed. The driver stared at us, breathing hard like he'd been running. "What was that?" he asked. "What was that?" "We don't open for them," the tall man said, folding his newspaper so tight the ink smeared onto his fingers. "Not when the water's still in their hair." The bus pulled away because the light forced us to. The driver cursed and hit the radio again. It crackled with a voice now. Dispatch asking for our location, clear as day. He should have been relieved, but he looked like he wanted to cry. A mile down the road, we hit a construction zone and had to stop again. I finally turned to the tall man. "What do you mean, them?" He didn't answer. He watched the window like the dark was pressing on it. "They've been on this line since the flood," he said finally. 3 years ago. Took out the old bridge. People still leave flowers. You didn't grow up here." He glanced at the driver. "You did." The driver nodded once, jaw tight. He wouldn't look at me. "Kid," he said, "you don't open the doors for anything wet. That's what the old-timers used to say." I thought it was superstition. I thought it was... He didn't finish. We got moving again. My chest ached like I'd been holding my breath. When I looked down at my hands, I saw 4 small wet fingerprints on my palm, in the exact place you'd hold a child's hand. I wiped them on my jeans. They didn't smear. They didn't dry, twist ending. When I got home that night, I left my bus ticket on my dresser to dry. In the morning, there was a watermark across it that hadn't been there before. An outline of a small hand, as perfect as if it had been pressed there from the inside of the paper. Story 4. The wrong transfer. I live in a city where you need a transfer ticket to switch buses late at night. You get a little slip with a timestamp and a code. I kept mine tucked into my phone case. It was simple, and it kept me from fumbling in the cold. At 1:10 a.m., I got off the night bus at a hub where 3 lines meet. The hub is just a concrete island with a metal shelter, a flickering light, and a vending machine that never works. Usually, there are a few people hanging around, but that night it was just me and a guy in a suit who looked like he'd had the worst day of his life. He clutched a briefcase like it held him together. The electronic sign said, "My transfer bus would come at 1:18. The wind came down the street like it had teeth. I pulled my hood tight and checked my transfer slip. The timestamp had smudged a little, but I could still read it. 1:12 to 1:42. Good. A bus turned the corner at 1:16 early and nosed up to the curb. It was the right number, right route. The driver wore a dark uniform and a cap with a shiny brim. I don't see caps like that on drivers anymore. He didn't look at me when he opened the doors. The inside lights were dimmer than usual, like the bus was trying to save electricity. The guy in the suit got on first. He put a handful of coins into the box, even though the system hasn't taken coins in years. I had a weird moment where I couldn't decide if I should say something, and then I thought, maybe I've been wrong this whole time. Maybe they still do take coins and I just never noticed. You can convince yourself of anything when you're tired. I offered my transfer slip. The driver didn't touch it. He leaned forward and I finally saw his face. It was pale and smooth like wax, and his eyes were dark. Not black exactly, just very deep, like there was no light in them at all. He glanced at the slip and said, in a voice that seemed too careful, "Not valid." "It's valid until 1:42, I said, pointing. "Look." He didn't. He kept his eyes on mine and said the same thing again, exactly the same, like he had recorded the sentence and was playing it back. "Not valid." I felt a stubborn spark. "I'll call dispatch." He raised one hand, not to stop me or threaten me, but to pass me something. He held out a different transfer slip. It was an older style, cream-colored, with a neat stamp and a tiny logo in the corner the system stopped using years ago. "Use this," he said. The suit guy was already halfway down the bus, sitting on the left. He didn't look back. The windows were so fogged I couldn't see out. It smelled like matches had been struck and blown out. "Where did you get this?" I asked, holding the old slip. The driver watched me with those deep eyes. "It's valid," he said. I should have gotten off. I should have waited 8 more minutes in the wind. But I stepped aboard and the doors shut behind me with a tight seal that made my ears pop. I moved to the middle and sat across from the suit guy. He stared at his briefcase. The bus pulled away with a slow, heavy motion, like it was full, but I could see no one else. We drove past the corner where I always see the mural of a cat. I couldn't see it. We drove past the pharmacy with the Red Cross sign. The cross wasn't lit. Streetlights slid by in a pattern that didn't match the ones I knew. My stomach started to crawl up into my chest. The bus didn't speak. No stop announcements, no chimes. The only sound was the engine and the occasional soft knock from somewhere under the floor. The suit guy finally looked at me. He had no color in his face like the driver. "Do you have the time?" he asked. 1:23, I said, checking my phone. My battery icon flickered and dropped from 48% to 15% while I was looking at it. "Good," he said, and clasped the briefcase tighter. "I have until 1:42. "Until what?" "Until she finds me," he said, and smiled at nothing. "Transfers don't work after that." I stood up and moved toward the front. "Sir?" I said to the driver, keeping my voice calm. "Can you please stop at the next—" "Not valid," he said, the same recorded voice. He didn't look at me. I glanced at the fare box and my stomach turned over. It wasn't a fare box, not the kind we use anyway. It looked like a black metal slot set into a wooden box. Someone had carved initials into the top, AK, ML, a date from decades ago. Burn marks around the edges, a thin line of ash along the slot like residue. The bus slowed. I looked out the window. My breath fogged the glass and left a circle. I rubbed it away with my sleeve and saw a street I didn't know. A row of old houses with pointed roofs and dark windows. A woman stood under a porch light staring straight at us. She raised her arm and pointed down the street, long and slow. The bus rolled in the direction of her finger. The suit guy started to cry. He did it quietly with his face tilted down, so the tears fell onto the briefcase. The drops made tiny dark circles that didn't fade. He whispered, "Please," to no one in particular. "Please, not yet." We passed a block with a boarded-up store. The sign above the door said, in faded gold paint, "Transfer and Telegraph." I had never seen that place in my life. The bus pulled to the curb there and opened its doors. The driver turned his head to me for the first time since I'd boarded. "This is you," he said. "No, it isn't," I said. "I don't live here." "This is you," he repeated. The suit guy stood up, shaking. "Please," he said to me, voice raw. "If you have a transfer, could I borrow it? Just to hold. I need something to hold." I looked down at my phone. 1:41. My transfer, the old one, felt warm in my hand. I almost gave it to him. Then, without knowing why, I tucked it back into my phone case and stepped off the bus. The street smelled like wood smoke and cold iron. The sign above Transfer and Telegraph creaked in the wind. I turned around to ask the driver where we were, but the bus doors closed. The driver watched me with those deep eyes. The engine made a low, eager sound. The suit guy pressed his palm to the window, mouthing something I couldn't hear. The bus pulled away and disappeared around the corner. The street fell silent. I stood there for a long minute, hugging myself, until I realized my phone had no signal, just a blank bar where the service should be, like a missing tooth. I tried the door to the shop, locked. My breath came out in clouds. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft, quick, light. I turned. No one there. Then I realized the sound wasn't on the street. It was inside the shop, on the other side of the door. The footsteps hurried up to the glass and stopped inches from my hand. I backed away fast. My heel hit the curb and I stumbled into the street. A car swung around the corner, an old low sedan with chrome trim. It passed through me like fog. Cold soaked me to the bone, and for a second I couldn't breathe. I fell to my knees and gagged. When I looked up, the shop sign had changed. Same place, same letters, but new paint, new bulbs in the porch light. The date on a tiny metal plaque by the door said the current year. The door opened from the inside. A bored teenager in a branded hoodie stuck his head out. "We're closed," he said. "What is this place?" I asked. He blinked at me. "It's a self-storage. Used to be a telegraph office in like the 50s. You okay?" I wasn't. I ran to the corner and recognized the next block over. I recognized the deli and the bus shelter and a mural I'd seen 100 times. I walked home shaking, and I didn't sleep. Twist ending. The next morning, I checked the transfer slip in my phone case. It wasn't the old cream one anymore. It was my original with the modern logo, except the timestamp had changed. It now read 112 to 142, and below the code, in tiny letters, there was a printed name I didn't notice before. The same initials I'd seen carved into the fare box, AK. I looked it up later out of morbid curiosity. Those were the initials of a driver who died on my line in a depot fire decades ago. The system never printed names on transfers, but there it was, inked like it belonged. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.